Welcome, age of vintage society. Leonard Nimoy leaves a proud legacy as an actor, teacher, philanthropist and advocate for many of the qualities he infused in his enduring alter ego, the science and logic-loving Mr. Spock of Star Trek. Star Trek is the best fictional universe ever created, and Spock was the finest thing about it. Why Leonard Nimoy's influence as Spock can be felt beyond entertainment. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. Artistic individuals are born with a need to express their point of view through the process of creation, and depending on the genius of that person, a work becomes synonymous with their name and legacy. This is the case with Leonard Nimoy. Thanks to Leonard Nimoy, the iconic actor whose talent put life into the green-blooded, half-Vulcan, half-human character, Spock became an icon. Years after Star Trek TOS went off the air, Spock's gestures remained part of lore. There was the raised eyebrow that communicated enough disdain to confound Queen Victoria. There was the single, cryptic, fascinating, uttered at moments of scandal, of nonsense, of drama. And there were the rare but hilarious moments in which the deeply nonsensical humour that was inside Spock shone through brilliantly. All these were Nimoy's gifts as an artist, such a large gift that the actor became synonymous with the character, something that plagued Nimoy throughout his life. Ultimately he made peace with that. But given the choice, if I had to be someone else, I would be Spock, said Nimoy. Thanks to Leonard Nimoy for giving life to that character on behalf of fans. We realise that as an artist he struggled with being typecast, and we thank him for embracing that struggle on our behalf. We all realise that his gift was far wider in scope than the character Spock. He played a stony-faced Vulcan with two hearts and no emotions, but who knew Nimoy once owned a pet shop in Canoga Park? Or that he teamed with Vic Morrow in 1962 to produce an indie film based on Jean Genet's edgy play Death Watch? Or that he paid for and narrated a TV special, If the Mind is Free, that aired only in Chicago to raise money for the city's St. Mary High School. He was born on March 26, 1931 to Max and Dora Nimoy, Jewish immigrants from present-day Ukraine. He was fluent in the Jewish language Yiddish and showed much support for his fellow Jews. Max was a barber in Mattapan and Dora a housewife, but the family grew up in a tenement on Boston's West End. Reflecting tenement life in general, the Nimoys packed 3 generations, Leonard's grandparents and the immediate family, into a small apartment. As a child he frequented the West End House and the Elizabeth Peabody House. The Peabody House had many activities for children, including a science lab, sports, and a theatre with 375 seats. Leonard's older brother Melvin enjoyed the science lab and later became a chemical engineer with a graduate degree from MIT, but Leonard preferred the theatre, and his first production at the Peabody House was Hansel and Gretel, at 8 years old. At 17 he had a part in the local production of Awake and Sing, a play about an impoverished family and their immigrant boarder in the 1930s Bronx. Nimoy recalled that the plot was very close to his own life, and that deeper significance to the arts inspired him to move to California to pursue acting when he was 18. Nimoy lived in Hollywood and by 1951 started picking up supporting roles in lesser-known movies. He also studied at the Pasadena Playhouse for 6 months, and his speech coach helped him lose his Boston accent in order to get more parts. In 1953 Nimoy served in the U.S. Army Reserve, becoming a sergeant and spending 18 months at Georgia's Fort McPherson. Even in the Army he continued to act, directing and starring in A Streetcar Named Desire with the Atlanta Theatre Guild. He even convinced the Army to let him direct and write radio and television programs for the troops. Upon returning to California in 1955 he picked up minor parts in some obscure movies and well-known TV shows, including Dragnet, Gunsmoke, Bonanza, Perry Mason and Highway Patrol. He also taught method acting and worked odd jobs to support his first wife and children until he was cast in a late 1964 pilot episode of Star Trek. Before the show premiered on NBC, on September 8, 1966. But the role of Spock was first offered to Martin Landau. He turned it down and it went to Nimoy, would later replace Landau when he quit Mission Impossible. A few of his odd jobs included selling vacuum cleaners and freezers, working at a pet store and an ice cream parlour, driving a taxi, servicing vending machines, managing an apartment building, and installing and servicing fish tanks. He even opened his own short-lived pet shop, Leonard Nimoy's Pet Pad. He was not just an actor, but had a broad range and set of interests from poetry to directing. In addition to his 2 autobiographies, he wrote 7 books of poetry. Some of these books included his photography as well. If that isn't enough to prove that Nimoy was truly a jack of all trades, he also adapted and performed in a one-man play called Vincent, based on the play Van Gogh in 1981. He even had an Etsy store. Yet he is likely best known globally and throughout the United Federation of Planets as the pointy-eared Vulcan in both the original Star Trek television series, a later animated Saturday morning series, and many movies set in the Star Trek universe. Nimoy made $1,250 per episode of Star Trek in the beginning. Whilst that doesn't seem like a particularly hefty salary for a TV star these days, adjusted for inflation, that's almost $10,000 in today's world. But Nimoy's influence can be felt beyond entertainment. He and Star Trek have long had an affinity with real space exploration. In 1967, some NASA scientists launching Mariner 5 for a flyby of Venus wore Spock's iconic pointed ears. Famously, the first space shuttle orbiter, built for the atmospheric approach and landing tests, was named Enterprise in response to a fan letter writing campaign. In September 1976, Nimoy and many of his fellow cast members attended the vehicle's rollout in Palmdale, California. And Star Trek's diverse crew became one model for recruiting candidates to the 1978 class of NASA astronauts, which included the first female, Asian American and African American candidates, when NASA hired Nichelle Nichols, the African American actress who played Star Trek's Uhura, to conduct public relations campaign for the agency. He was a champion for pay equality. In the United States and around the world, women are paid less than men in all kinds of industries, including the arts. On Star Trek, Nichelle Nichols, who played Uhura, didn't receive the same amount of pay as her fellow bridge crew officers, which Leonard Nimoy wasn't happy about. Walter Koenig, who played Pavel Chekhov, told the Las Vegas Sun, when it came to the attention of the cast that there was a disparity in pay and that George, Takei, and I were getting the same pay, but Nichelle was not getting as much, I took it to Leonard, and he took it to the front office, and they corrected that. Nimoy also intervened to help his fellow cast members on the Star Trek animated series. George and Nichelle were not hired to do their voices in the animated series. I refused to do Spock until they were hired. Mr. Roddenberry started calling me the conscience of Star Trek. Star Trek was cancelled in 1969 after 3 seasons, but it attracted a widespread cult following that spawned many Star Trek movies with the original cast, many of which were directed or written by Nimoy. He had a strong personal identification with Spock because he was the other, the alien. I grew up feeling that way, as the son of Jewish immigrants in the West End. Because of Nimoy's busy schedule on the show, combined with his skill in method acting, he often never stopped feeling like Spock until midday Sundays, only to get back into the studio on Mondays. Spock's second wife, Susan Bay Nimoy, was also an actor who guest-starred as Admiral Rollman in 2 episodes of Star Trek. After the show's cancellation, Nimoy acted in 2 seasons of the TV series Mission Impossible, but he left the show considering a career change to photography. In the West End, a childhood friend taught Nimoy how to make a darkroom out of his own bathroom and cheaply print photographs with the family camera. He went to the University of California, Los Angeles to study photography, but he ultimately decided to continue acting. He wanted to be a fine art photographer instead of a commercial photographer, but found that fine art photography was not a stable profession. This did not stop Nimoy from pursuing diverse interests. He published photography books, albums with pop music and spoken word, and even received a master's degree in Spanish from Antioch University, Austin. His performance, one of the very best in the far-flung annals of fantasy, was typically cool, dryly funny, stern, never robotic. Nimoy embodied his character so fully, all but perfectly, that Spock might have been Spock even without the pointed ears, the eyebrows that looked like an accent acute opposite an accent grave, and the dark hair brushed forward like a seal pelt. But if the make-up conveyed an alien, it also highlighted the very human strengths of Nimoy's face, the prominent high-bridged nose, the sombre mouth, the deep-set intelligent eyes. It was a face so severe it threw itself into shadow. Apart from Spock, Nimoy enjoyed success directing movies, 2 of the Star Trek films including Voyage, the hit comedy 3 Men and a Baby, the less successful The Good Mother with Diane Keaton, and television. His acting roles tended to capitalise on his Vulcan aloofness and intellect, from an untrustworthy pop psychologist in 1978's remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers to an untrustworthy scientific genius on Fox's cult classic, Fringe. No matter what Nimoy did, it only fed into the enduring legacy of Spock and Star Trek. Nimoy already had his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He deserves a constellation up in the night sky. Paradoxically, it's the humanity in the character of Spock, even when he was playing an alien, that really made him beloved by the fan community. The character of Spock was originally intended to act as a foil to the original cast, providing a persona grounded fiercely in rationality and logic. But it was Nimoy's depiction of Spock that made the character a true favourite of the Star Trek fan base, and an indispensable touchstone to the larger Star Trek franchise. Nimoy managed to depict Spock with a great deal of humanity. He injected humour and the empathy, though he was playing a very straight, rational, emotionless role. But he was not always quick to embrace the link between himself and the character of Spock. Nimoy somewhat bristled at the typecasting that had followed him. He was going through a phase all Trek actors have. He was sick of playing the character and wanted out. To appease him, it was decided that Spock would be killed off early on. Then somehow the script was leaked and fans had a shared nervous breakdown. The source of the leak was never truly revealed, but the actors and producers largely accepted that Gene himself leaked the pages of the script. He was vocal about not wanting Spock killed off and was frustrated with the darker plot, as well as the theme of growing into middle age. He wanted to sabotage the project, or at least have Spock's death taken out of the script. In the end, it was just rearranged, and if anything, it made the film even better. But beyond these factoids is the sense that Nimoy, through his association with the character, was a living representation of the utopia that Star Trek represented. Star Trek filming schedules were grueling, and he would be in character almost 6 days a week. Nimoy has said that during filming he'd find himself acting like Spock, more logical and less emotional, even when the cameras weren't rolling. He said that this Vulcan way of life, including speech patterns, were present in his own life for years after Star Trek ended. In the world of television, few individuals are more admired than the late Leonard Nimoy. Through his role as Mr. Spock on the classic show Star Trek, Nimoy ignited the imaginations of countless fans and inspired an entire generation. Though less known, he also lived an utterly fascinating and very surprising life outside of television. Leonard Nimoy died at age 83 on the 27th of February 2015 due to complications of the lung disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, at his residential home in Bel Air in Los Angeles, California, United States. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Leonard Nimoy? The actor was informally regarded and greatly loved as one of the most rational beings on the planet, and maybe in the galaxy.